It was John F. Kennedy who said, they're always good for a quote, US presidents, "Time and the world do not stand still. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are certain to miss the future." And as we heard from Richard, this week, LIDW is really asking us to look to the future. He wants us to question, note the question mark, in our outlook, are we really global? Are we really always ethical? And are we truly sustainable? What can we do right now to protect our future? So the three of us are all here representing one of the key strands of dispute resolution: arbitration, mediation, and litigation. We've all been involved in efforts to collectively change behavior in the practice of disputes to address the climate emergency. So in relation to those three strands, I'm going to give you 3 dates. See if you can guess their significance. 1895, 1958, and 1999. If any of the arbitration practitioners didn't get the 1958, I'll be surprised. So, 1895 was the year in which the Commercial Court in London was established. 1958 was, of course, the New York Convention. And 1999 was the year of the Wolf reforms, and for many of us practicing in London at the time, that was really the first time that mediation became a very important part of our practices. So far, so good. Let me tell you, in 1895, the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere was 294 parts per million. In 1958, it was 316. In 1999, it was 367. Today, it is 422. And it's not up for debate that we have to get back to at least 1990 CO2 levels to avoid catastrophic climate change. But we will be part of the problem and not part of the solution if we continue to run our practices as if we're still in the 1990s. And when I launched the Green Pledge, I did so mainly because I looked at one of my cases in 2018, and I realized that nothing had really changed since my very first arbitration in 1998. We had all the technology available to us to run our arbitrations in a more environmentally friendly way. We just weren't using it. So what can we do? So leaving aside electronic bundles, which frankly should be the norm, there are lots of changes we can make to our practices, and I'm just going to talk about 2. The average carbon footprint per person in the UK is 12 tons. 1 return flight from London to Houston business class is equivalent to 7 tons of carbon emissions. To have the best chance of avoiding a 2% rise in global temperatures, the average carbon footprint across the globe needs to drop to under 2 tons by 2050. So it's been a message of the campaign for greener arbitration since the very beginning, and that message is quite simple: fly less. But there are small changes we can make as well. When the campaign first began, we ran a very, very detailed audit of a major international arbitration. We looked at all sorts of things. We looked at printing, couriers, flights, hotels, taxis, everything you would expect. We also looked at disposable coffee cups. We found that during that one international arbitration, over 3,000 coffee cups were used, which tells you a couple of things. Arbitration practitioners drink an awful lot of coffee, but I will tell you, in relation to those 3,000 disposable cups, that equates to about a ton of carbon equivalent emissions. So it's a small change, but you can do it. Lose the disposable cup. But it is really up to us how we navigate the future, and we just can't go back to the way things were. You just don't need me to stand here and tell you quite how wasteful our practices were. I can hit you with data and statistics. I can talk about the tons of carbon, the long-haul flights, the mountains of bundles, the unnecessary travel to the unnecessary meetings. But we all knew how wasteful our practices were. We just thought it was someone else's problem. And we're here to tell you it isn't. The change to the way we have been working as a result of the pandemic has been the biggest change, certainly to my practice, since I began practicing 25 years ago. But we didn't endlessly debate it. We didn't agonize over it. We didn't worry about what was the best platform. We just got on and did it because we had no alternative. And being very frank with you right now, we do not have any alternative. We have to reduce our carbon footprint. We simply have to change. And there are many, many reasons you can decide to change today. You can do it to stay relevant. You can do it to be more efficient. You can do it to please the clients, to deal with our guilt, to attract new hires, to placate our children. The reason for making the change isn't important, but making the change is. So I began with JFK, I'm going to end with Barack Obama. And he said, we are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change. And believe me, everyone in the room knows we are feeling those effects. But we are the last generation to do something about it. LIDW has given us a great platform this week to put sustainability center stage. And Jenny and John are going to talk more about how you can support our efforts and the steps, more importantly, that you can take to reduce the carbon footprint of your practice, whether you arbitrate, litigate, mediate, or all three. Thank you. Jenny.
Each of Green Litigation, the Campaign for Greener Arbitrations, and the World Mediators Alliance on Climate Change have at their heart a simple message, that all of us involved in dispute resolution can take small steps every day that collectively can help reduce carbon emissions and combat climate change. The beginning of Green Litigation came in the first lockdown of 2020. As COVID forced us to reconsider how we litigate, my firm, Mishcon de Reya, analysed data from remote hearings as against a comparable number of physical hearings from the pre-COVID time. According to that research, the average remote hearing saved 50 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent on travel to and from court and emissions associated with accommodation. A further 20 kilograms was saved by switching from paper to electronic bundles. For interim hearings the firm was involved in, taking place in a 6-week window in April and May 2020, over 21,000 pages were not printed that ordinarily would have been, a significant saving in a short period of time. And it's a similar story in arbitration. The Campaign for Greener Arbitrations conducted a study of a medium to large-scale arbitration and estimated that around 20,000 trees would be required to offset the carbon emissions from just that one in-person arbitration. And as Lucy alluded to, long-haul flights are a big contributor, as much as 3/4 of total emissions in a typical arbitration. These numbers make a big impact. Taking the data a step further, an in-person hearing in a medium-sized, London-seated international arbitration, the campaign estimated that emissions are approximately 19 times higher for an in-person hearing compared to virtual. That difference is the equivalent of the average amount of carbon emitted by 15 people in the EU in an entire year, just by switching one hearing from in-person to virtual. If we as a community of dispute resolution professionals want to contribute to tackling the climate change crisis and achieving net zero as quickly as possible, we each need to take a step back and consider how we can change the way we work. Each of the 3 initiatives we're representing today includes a green pledge, a means by which dispute resolution professionals can sign up and commit to reducing carbon emissions when conducting litigation, arbitration, and mediation. Each pledge sets out practical steps we can all take, and each one is designed to be sufficiently broad and flexible enough to allow for the fact that each piece of dispute resolution is different, each client is different, and measures need to be tailored accordingly. Having been drafted by dispute resolution professionals, the pledges recognise that the steps we take must also maintain and promote the highest standards of justice and client service. The steps set out in the pledges include corresponding electronically where possible, limiting the printing of hard copy bundles and preferring electronic, considering if it's appropriate to request or agree to a remote hearing, considering if it's appropriate to give witness evidence remotely, particularly where a witness is located overseas, and walking, cycling, and taking public transport to court and hearings wherever possible. For some steps, they involve us making active changes to the way we work. For others, they're steps many of us are already taking. COVID forced us to adapt overnight, and we did so. The climate crisis requires us to make long-term change, and quickly. The pledges are good ways of keeping the importance of making that change at the forefront of all of our minds whenever we are litigating, arbitrating, or mediating. And the work of the three initiatives does not end with the pledges. For green litigation, a key part of our work is engaging in dialogue with the courts to understand how we can bring about procedural change. In the courts of England and Wales initially, but we're hoping to establish international chapters within the next 6 months. We've been pleased to see that the most recent version of the English Commercial Court Guide endorses the switch to electronic bundles and encourages litigants to reflect on whether in-person witness evidence is necessary from those located overseas. We hope that by engaging with other parts of the court system, from the county courts to other parts of the High Court and beyond, we can help drive other procedural changes, identifying how many changes amount to both better environmental behaviour and a more efficient court system. Green litigation currently has 3 working groups, looking at expanding the reach of green litigation overseas and to corporate supporters, engaging with the courts, and analysing the role technology can play in the drive to net zero. In particular, we recognise that the use of technology has a significant carbon footprint in addition to printed paper, and we must engage with this issue to ensure we are meaningfully reducing the net environmental impact of our work. Similarly, on the arbitration side, the Campaign for Greener Arbitrations has developed green protocols. These provide a framework to promote better environmental behaviour in arbitral proceedings through a series of action items. For example, by providing a model procedure order for parties to adopt in arbitrations, and by providing detailed guidelines for arbitrators, institutions, and law firms to adopt, helping minimise the environmental impact of each stage of an arbitration by identifying practical steps to take or avoid at each stage. I'm going to leave John to talk about the World Mediators Alliance, but if you or your organisation has already signed up to one of Green Litigation, the Campaign for Greener Arbitrations, or the World Mediators Alliance, we would love to hear what you're doing to implement the commitments of the pledges and how our project work can help take things forward. And if you haven't yet signed up and would like to find out more, do come and visit our table in the hall in one of the breaks to speak with one of us. Thank you very much.
We invite you to bring with you a reusable bottle to make use of the water fountains at the venue, although this is not a specific requirement. Well done to the organisers of this event for making this notice so prominent in your pre-event information email. A bit of audience participation and a quick show of hands. How many of you read this? Not bad. All right. How many have brought your reusable bottle? Perhaps this does need to be a specific requirement after all. No entry without a reusable bottle. Think about it. It's a great privilege to be invited to speak at this event, and thank you to Barry Fletcher in particular and his fellow organisers for having the vision to make this a keynote slot. And it's also a real privilege to follow Lucy and Jenny, who have done such good work. Indeed, Lucy's work on the Arbitrator's Pledge was the inspiration for our Green Mediator, or Mediator's Green Pledge. But I've been asking myself, what can I add to the challenges which Jenny and Lucy have already presented to you this morning? Well, in true mediator style, perhaps what I can do is to ask some further questions. So, how seriously do you really treat this topic? What has been your reaction, honestly, to what you've just heard? Do you view this as optional? Not for you. Bit irritating, perhaps? Uncomfortable, even. Perhaps not worthy of an opening keynote address. Where does all of this lead you, really? What does being sustainable and ethical mean to you? And yes, Richard, it's a question mark. As you said, Richard, should we be bothered at all? For example, given what we have heard, should we each be capping the number of flights we take in a year? Drastically. What other changes must we make to really address the situation? What would be the implications of doing so, really, for you, your clients, and your professional practice? If we assume that the facts and the science, indeed the urgency, are now clear, and they are, why would we not make these changes? Because of our business model, our clients' expectations, our sense of who we are, our identity, our reluctance to change? But where would not changing leave us and others on the planet as we contemplate sustainability and ethics? If not us, you, me, then who? It is, after all, people like us who need to change what we do. So let's just pause for a moment and ask ourselves the serious question. Aside from reusable bottles, what else do we need to change in order to make a real difference? This takes me to mediation and to the World Mediators Alliance on Climate Change, a grand title, www.womacc.org, WOMACC.org. While our Mediators Green Pledge is not yet as professionally promoted as the Arbitrators and Litigators Pledge, we shall learn and shamelessly borrow from both. We have, in fact, over 600 signatories so far from over 50 countries around the globe, with 15 or so translations. And we're working on a supporting corporate pledge, and it's a delight to see amongst the speakers this morning my friend Carl Ove Carl of GE, who has been assisting us with this particular project. Perhaps in catching up with other pledges, the Mediators Green Pledge is a little like mediation generally. While it has a pedigree, of course, going back over the ages, mediation has only really come to prominence, as you said, Lucy, in the most recent of your time spans. And that takes me to my major substantive point. While I respect both mediation and arbitration, after all, I practiced at the Scottish Bar for many years, I suggest that mediation offers a distinctive way to reduce carbon emissions in many disputes. I believe that our collective aspiration should be to achieve net zero carbon civil justice systems and net zero carbon dispute resolution overall. Anyone here who's been involved in mediation knows that compared to most litigation and most arbitration, mediation is relatively quick, often more efficient, less time-consuming, and less resource-intensive, or it should be. And mediation provides a useful route to identifying the underlying issues, what's really going on, and exploring a variety of commercial and non-legal options. Arguably, and I acknowledge provocatively, mediation offers an even more sustainable means of resolving disputes, of achieving net zero, a greener form of dispute resolution, if you like. And it seems to work really well online too. Back to the pledges. It all sounds great in theory, but again, what does it mean in practice? Well, it probably means sacrifice as well as commitment. On a personal level, I've lost the opportunity to act as a mediator in a number of cases by adhering until recently to an online policy when understandably some people want to meet in person, including in the Maldives. I've not been inside an aircraft for 26 months. That's hard, as it means, for example, that I'm missing an important mediators conference in Canada. And of course, I recognize the danger of being seen as too evangelical. This is not easy stuff. So I come back to that email about the reusable bottle. Perhaps it does need to be a specific requirement that we all bring one to an event like this. And that is just the start. In Edinburgh, there's an exciting multimedia exhibition on the work of the artist Vincent van Gogh. He once said something along these lines: "Great things are done by a series of small steps brought together. So let's all pledge to take those steps now and do great things together. We have no choice. Thank you.
So thank you, Jenny, Lucy, and John. Hopefully that got the thought, that provoked some thoughts already. I did challenge you at the start, but that's already got me thinking. I'm also been very impressed by the fact that we've already, and we've only been doing this for a very short period of time, done JFK, Vincent van Gogh, and Barack Obama. And to keep that theme going, the next session is headlined by a quote from Winston Churchill. If you're going through hell, keep on going. I'm going to hand over to the next panel who are going to take us through that discussion. Thank you very much again.